Hello and welcome to Conversations with Agents of Change. I'm Izzy Boyd and I'm the Agent of Change champion. On this show, we get to the heart of transformation. We go beyond achievements and job titles to uncover the real stories of people reshaping our world, the challenges they face, the courage they've summoned, and the ripple effects their accounts create across industries and communities. If you believe that business can and should be a force for good and that one voice can spark a movement, you're in the right place. Today, we're diving into a conversation that sits right at the intersection of innovation, sustainability, and bold system level thinking. My guest is someone who talks about change, and more importantly, she's so busy implementing it every day. Jacqueline Gibson is an award winning sustainability leader recognized across the UK and Ireland. She's a specialist in responsible business strategy, sustainable design and construction, ethical procurement, resource efficiency, biodiversity protection, social improvement, and economic regeneration. And she brings all of that into her work as director at International Synergies NI, where she leads the world's longest running industrial symbiosis program, a model that saves companies money, cuts environmental impact, and propels organizations toward net zero. Jacqueline helps businesses transform waste into opportunity and mindsets into momentum. And I really cannot wait for you to hear this conversation. Jacqueline, welcome to Conversations with Agents of Change. I am really excited to have you here. And to start us off, when people ask you, what do you do? How do you describe your work of leading the industrial symbiosis program and supporting
Um,
companies?
okay, well, thank you so much for having me on the show. I'm very honored. I feel very privileged that I'm part of these conversations as an agent of change because sometimes in this role, in this space of sustainability, you see very small changes and which is great and incrementally they can build up. But when you look at sometimes the global complex issues, you can get a bit downhearted. So thank you for reaffirming my conviction that I'm making change, positive change. So
Yes.
what are we all about and what is the program all about? So we take a leaf from nature's book, literally, where we apply this idea of symbiosis. So you think back to your biology in your school days, a symbiotic relationship is between two species where there's mutual benefit. Not working in isolation, working in collaboration, making use of one species waste product, for example, and it can be a home, a food source, something to incubate something that will later maybe be of benefit to that particular organism or even another species. So in nature where nothing is wasted, everything is reused, it becomes a home, it becomes a valuable resource. We believe that there's no such thing as a waste, but waste is actually just a resource in the wrong place. And most often it's in the wrong place or in the wrong hands. So when people say to me, what do I do? I guess I like to think that I'm a bit of an advocate, I'm an educator. I have to use a bit of cheeky charm, a bit of Irish humor when there's not a lot of guidance or regulation and legislation around sustainability, for example, like health and safety, there is a lot of freedom. But in some ways, organizations will say, well, I don't need you. I mean, do I have to do this? Well, if I don't have to do this, they don't maybe see the import of how this actually benefits their business. So where we come in is we talk about its cost saving. We are going to help with collaborations, a more resilient supply chain. You've probably got rising costs. You've got lag times now with maybe it's international tariffs of supplies and goods coming into the country. We're an island off an island. So when we think about can your waste be of use for another organization as a raw material? So this idea of industrial symbiosis, where an industrial ecosystem is where unused or residual resources from one company are used by another. And this could be capacity, it could be space, it could be a car park space that one company isn't using a lot of in Belfast, for example, and another company need that. It could be machinery that's turned off at night. It could be old forklift trucks that are sitting in a yard. But also it could be every day, every week, we're producing something on our production line and we've got all these offcuts. So that's a continuous supply of resources. So what we do is we kind of go and speak to companies We kind of sometimes think of ourselves as matchmakers or introducers, but unlike a matchmaking app, it kind of just lines you up with other maybe suitable people based on your profile. What we do is, yes, our system will allow for that, but also we facilitate the introductions. So we say, Izzy, would you like to meet Jacqueline? Because I see you have 3,000 Hessian sacks from your coffee production and your processing here in Belfast. And Jacqueline is looking for sacks for her apple growing business in South Armagh, for example. So it will do the matching, but also we facilitate this. So we ring you up and say, Izzy, look, I'm going to do an introduction to Jacqueline. Is this the sort of, could you be able to maybe give this to her? Now she's on our Armagh. We've found some companies nearby that could take your coffee sacks. There's a few men's sheds, there's social enterprises. It's up to you who you want to go with. But ultimately, you've told me how much you're spending every week to get rid of that waste material. I've then spoken to someone to say how much they're spending to buy in that material. So we just ask, look, just let me know what you would otherwise spend getting rid of that material, your waste cost, and the other party, how much you would be otherwise spending and the quantities that you would be buying. So we report back the cost savings combined and separately to the government. We then report on the carbon associated with your waste going to landfill. And we also report on the carbon for me, for example, taking that material from the virgin material savings. Because as you can imagine, 1 ton of picnic benches or 1 ton of wooden pallets doesn't really equate to 1 ton of wood coming from nature. It's more. There are offcuts, there's muck shift, there's, the transport CO2 emissions. So there's a bigger weighting on the virgin material factor rather than just 2 tons of wood going to landfill. So we report on the carbon for both parties, we report on the cost for both parties, and we report on the landfill diversion savings, and we report on the virgin material savings. And we report that back to Invest NI. So this is fully funded by the UK government through the Department for Economy, through Invest Northern Ireland. And it is the world's largest. Now, we've done this in over 50 countries. We want to be the world's leader in industrial symbiosis. And we've operated, as I say, in 50 countries. But on top of that, we've saved over 50 million tons of CO2 reduction. And that was just when we've been monitoring that and measuring that. So the ongoing relationships that are continuing to happen. And oh, by the way, Izzy, I might be taking coffee sacks from you, but oh, I see you've got cardboard. Can I also take your cardboard? So there are other materials that may come my way as a result of maybe ourselves not knowing about because of those really good relationships. And I will know someone who might know someone in your supply chain. So actually, it's underreported. So that 50 million tons is underreported.
I absolutely love it. I love it because you're clearly framing how transforming waste streams into opportunities, and it's just not. It's not
Absolutely.
very technical. It's like a mindset, and
It's
it just makes circular economy like feel accessible, which I'm loving it. I
I think for a lot of organizations, I mean, even they're very negative words around waste, rubbish, refuse, discarded. They're all very negative connotations associated with garbage. Whereas when we start to valorize or put value on a product, it's a byproduct.
yeah.
It's usable. We can extend the life cycle. We can redistribute that. We can remanufacture that. It becomes this valuable commodity. And I often say to organizations, when you go to the amenity site, you see many skips for lots of material types. And, might have wood, you might have plastics, carpets, clothing, but you never see one for gold.
Of course not.
Why do we not see a skip for gold?
Because we value that, and we are not just going to give it
No.
free or
Yeah. So
dispose that.
So we're actually very good at this thing called recovery, recycling, reuse when it comes to things that we value, like gold, for example. So why are we not applying that to other material types, like the phones? Like, okay, yes, gold. I'm just taking that as a simple example, But when you look at what is actually being mined in the world, it can fit into 2 Olympic-sized swimming pools of gold ever mined. So it's not a lot really, but we're really good at reusing it, and it's a rare, finite resource. So we need to think of all our resources as finite. They are running out. We're extracting them from nature at an exorbitant, insatiable appetite kind of level. And then we're also discarding. Our landfills are full here in Northern Ireland. So the majority of our waste is ending up where it's being shipped out of Belfast Harbour, our harbours, and heading off to Copenhagen and the Netherlands as burnt as green energy, as waste that couldn't otherwise be recovered or recycled. Really? Of course, we can recover this and recycle the majority of this. So waste contractors are making a lot of money charging companies to get rid of this nasty, yucky, dirty thing called waste and give them lovely clean reports. So we're kind of like the interceptors of the waste contractors. They don't particularly like us because we're going into organizations saying, as soon as you put it in the bin, it becomes a waste. And to collect my waste, Izzy, you would need a waste carrier's license and you need to have bits of paper and go to the Environment Agency. And, this could maybe a process that could take 4 to 6 months. But if you just set it to one side, if I set that to one side, it's my property. Or I send that to another one of my sites, I'm moving material. So it's not a waste. As soon as you put it into the bin or a skip, it becomes a waste. And that's where the problem is. But if we set it to one side or we store it for reuse and allow another organization to come in to take it, well, that's the deal. And for some organizations, the beauty is that they're actually getting paid. Now, so you tell me that you're spending, say, £1,500 a week getting rid of your waste, but I keep that confidential and I find someone who will take your waste for free. But then you find actually that person's spending 800 quid a week buying that product in from Germany. I'll maybe charge them 500. So not only are you saving 1,500, but you're
earning more.
you're earning 500. So there's a lot of that added value when people then they see opportunities. So we stick it all into a database. We go into companies, have a walk around, look at their room of doom. Most companies have a room of doom where it's just inherited old stock and stuff in a room. And walk around their warehouse, look at their production line, look into their bins. All companies we walk into already have waste contractors in place. We're trying to say, well, what are they charging you? How much are they taking? How much are you generating? And we help them with even just better segregation to even signpost them to waste contractors that maybe will remanufacture that or give them rebates. But if we can link them up with another business, that's better because that's a steady supply chain for them. And then we also ask them, what are you buying in? What are your problem materials? What are your headaches? What are those big overheads? Is it energy? Are the materials? Is it cars? Is it people? It could be transport, it could be logistics, tarpaulin, tires. What is it that you're buying in a lot of? Not just thinking about your own production line, but all the other costs. Really digging down. We stick that into the database and the database matches it up a bit like what a dating website will do. So we can get from one of your products that you're getting rid of, we could have 16 companies that would want to take that. And we will do those introductions and facilitate that. So it results in increased business opportunities, business collaborations locally, but ultimately it's reducing that environmental impact, reducing your environmental impact of sending that to landfill, reducing your operation costs, and also reducing the environmental impact of me having to buy that from Germany that's originally coming from Africa through China or the States or packaged somewhere else and coming in. And that's where we believe this is the most effective way to a net zero world. Because Izzy, when you look at some of the studies, even by the University of Oxford, they show that almost 25% of global greenhouse gas emissions, so a quarter of greenhouse gas emissions, are from the production of 4 main material types. So that's your woods, your plastics and rubber, your cement, and your iron and metal materials.
Okay.
Now, of those 4 materials, when we do workshops, so as I say, we go into organizations, we help about 60 a year save about £70,000 each. So a combined saving of 2 to 3 million a year savings
That's
with
a
60
great
companies
impact.
in Northern Ireland. Now, if we can't find a company within Northern Ireland to match them with, we will look to the Republic or in England or wider supply chain.
Yeah.
But ultimately, when we look at those 4 material types, they're used by most of the organizations. And we run 4 workshops a year and we did one a couple of weeks ago in Derry, and I can talk to you about some of the figures on that. So we had 22 organizations around the room, and within a 3-hour workshop, we identified savings of £14 million savings.
Wow.
And that was literally getting people sitting around a table, tables of 10, writing on the bits of paper, what do you have that you're getting rid of that's going to waste? What do you want? What do you need? And there's also a section on the back if I don't need that, or that's really interesting. You've got loads of bags of nails, or Northern Ireland Screen were there. You've got a Viking boat. It's not something I particularly need at the moment, but I think the school that I know down the road or that we work with may be able to take that, or I know a local men's shed. So there's an option for referral section as well. And that's where the beauty and the creativity comes out, because people think, well, I want to make a seat, so I'm thinking I need bits of wood and furniture, but wow, here's an aircraft manufacturing company at this workshop, and they've got loads of offcuts of leather, really high quality leather, and you guys are just paying to get rid of this. So all of a sudden I think, oh, can I make this into my furniture? And I can reupholster with this leather,
Which
these
is
leather offcuts.
It's really amazing because it's about thinking outside the box. Like we don't know what we need until we are actually going to need it. So
Exactly.
when you are in those workshops and you start being creative, it's like, right, okay, is bring attention into what you actually have as waste or what you would consider as waste, and then match that with what you could need. So it's an amazing work and I'm loving it. But I have this curiosity, like what was the moment that sparkled that passion for sustainability and to change systems? So what was the beginning of it? What triggered that in
You know,
yourself?
me, oh, I think it stems right back from my childhood, Izzy. I came from a broken family with a broken marriage with my parents. And in some ways, yes, it was quite tough growing up. But in other ways, it allowed me to have 2 homes. And my dad, I was actually born on a sugar estate in West Africa, in Ivory Coast. It's now owned by Green and Blacks and the world's largest fair trade organic cocoa plantation.
Okay.
And then my dad, he was originally from Northern Ireland, studied botany at Queen's. They went to Africa. And after I was born, I was about 1 or 2 when they divorced. So my mum came back to Northern Ireland and my dad stayed in Africa, and he set up an NGO in sustainable agriculture in Zambia. So sub-Sahara Africa, from the age of 6, 7, 8, 9 onwards, my summers, 2 months of the summer were spent in Zambia on safaris, talking to chiefs, talking to members of the World Bank, Swedish Aid, NORAD, USAID, listening around the dinner table about these complex challenges of climate change, drought, poverty, why people are killing species and animals, and poaching is rife, and corruption in government. And then you come back to your winters in Ireland, raining every day, very green, lush, fertile soils. And I suppose maybe during the Troubles as well, not really a lot of policing around environmental regulations. And of course, I saw pollution into rivers. I saw farmers polluting, dumping at sea, fly tipping. And there weren't many species that we were able to see in Ireland, apart from reading in books or a dead badger in the road after a full moon. And I thought, wow, people are very quick to criticize the third world and talk about, oh, it's terrible. People kill elephants in Africa. And why don't they leave them alone for their ivory? And you think, well, what have we done to all our species here? And we're not in the developing world. So you kind of just see the same occurrences and the same patterns of a very domineering kind of attitude of man existing to take, make, and have short-term economic growth. And maybe I just realized that that I thought, no, I want to work contrary to that. I want to be able to help. Now, I love Africa, great place, lovely lifestyle. Being white, being a female probably sets you back in some ways. And I know when we think about International Women's Day as well, and certain days that stand out for women to try and be advocates of ourselves and get men to be advocates of women too. So there are some things that can work against us. But by being white, you see the privilege that a white person has. You see the inequality of other countries. So when you start looking at the whole concept of what sustainability is all about, the equity, the social justice aligned with climate, it's all dependent on climate. And that's driving a lot of this. And you see that connect very clearly. That's where you get it. I think the challenge is, and I was saying, yes, I could go back to Africa probably and get a job tomorrow in a lovely luxurious lodge just because of my background and having a British and Irish passport and having an education here. But I don't want to do that. I think that my impact is going to be more effective trying to convert the more developed so-called world and the Western world and having influence here. And how do I bring back those issues, those problems, those concerns, and those challenges? Because we're very divorced from it geographically, but also mentally. But how do we translate some of those things into local businesses? For example, a construction company that operates in Northern Ireland, or a printing company in Northern Ireland, or someone at my workshop. So you don't want to shut them off and bamboozle them, but you want to bring them on board with simple, clear messages that they're actually going to have a positive impact on those countries. So actually, by helping a company find a raw material from somebody else in Northern Ireland, well, I'm helping inhibit and eradicating the need for them to source that material from ultimately coming from maybe the Congo and using cobalt and helping fund conflict and diamonds. And but I don't necessarily we say that. We say, oh, this is cost saving and but to your otherwise supply chain. So I think ultimately seeing the bigger long-term vision, what can you do in the meantime? What are those small steps? So I believe that kind of upbringing, and I saw a lot of people being very proud of a country here in Northern Ireland, both sides of a very divided community. We're proud to be this, we're proud to be that, and fighting for this land. And all I could see was, well, they're not really looking after the land. And why is there pollution on the land? And why are people going out marching and throwing cans and drinks and all these days? And, we pride ourselves in being a green island, this Emerald Isle. And we're one of the least forested. We have fly tipping, environmental regulations, our own government. So there's a lot of issues there. There's a lot that we need to do, but ultimately we could be so much better.
Absolutely. And I think we are on that route. And I think, of course, as you say, there's so much to do, but I am just amazed to see how your journey has been. It, it wasn't accidental. It just has been kind of built through exposure. And I think it's really important. And it's the intuition and the sense of responsibility. And I think that when we bring awareness to the real problems and when we compare and when we are critical and see, like, we all live here, we need to tidy up this place, we need to make sure that it's sustainable in a way that we cannot keep consuming, consuming, consuming. We need to stop using things that we don't need and reuse few things and try to
This
figure
is
ways out. So it's amazing. I love it. And it's a very interesting concept and it's very powerful that you're turning the organization's waste into another valuable resource. And I love how you explain that because it was kind of very clear, very intuitive, and then it kind of makes sense. It's like, yeah, how didn't we think about this before, you know? And it's good for the businesses because it's saving the money, it's reducing the carbon, and at the same time, it's sparking innovation. And it's like, wait, okay, so how do we think of outside the box? I love it. And it's a win-win thinking, which I'm loving it. And I just love how you involve and collaborate people and connect businesses across sectors. And how does it feel to bring many different stakeholders from different backgrounds on board? And what have you learned about getting people believe that change is possible?
So I think our workshops are a clear demonstration of that, Izzy. We have people from Autism Northern Ireland rocking up at a workshop with a dog. We have someone from the creative sector who makes aprons. We have a school. We have the likes of the Wright Bus, the Camden Windows, the Heron Construction Manufacturing. And we have all these different organizations in the room that wouldn't normally be in the room together.
Yeah.
Pretty much normally construction people will focus on construction. Hospitality, hotels will go to conferences with other hotels. But if you put them all together, they're all going to have pretty much the same waste streams. So we're finding that 90% of the materials that you have go outside your sector. 90% go outside of your sector.
Okay, that's
So that means we need to
really relevant.
Yeah, that's what our research has shown us. So we don't know who's next door. Staff arrive at the office, they arrive at work, they go into their car park. They don't actually know even what the people down the end of the corridor, what their role is, what their job is. They might maybe see the logo, might get chatting to them in the car park, but you don't know what their waste streams are. You don't know what's happening 6 miles down the road because you're focused on all of your inputs, all of your outputs, your sales, your staff. So organizations don't know what's happening even around the corner, never mind 16 miles away, never mind in Maherfeld, 60 miles away.
Yeah.
Wow, you guys use this. We need the same cutters for our machinery, but we're getting them from Switzerland twice a year. But you're getting them from somewhere else, or you have them in house and you only use them twice a year. Can you then share that with us? So when you're having a coffee or having a networking breakfast, we start off always with networking. Then we get everyone around the table and writing on bits of paper. Then we tally that up at the end of the day and we work out the cost savings. But you just lift up papers. I walk around the table and I say, "Is everybody okay? We're writing down lots of ideas." And people are like, "This is brilliant." And I didn't think, I wrote this down and I didn't think anyone would want this, but this man here, he said he can take that. Or, a bit of paper comes onto your table and you see there's someone who's going to take that, but I want it as well. And then you find out at the end, well, what are you going to do with it? Oh, well, I was going to make it into this, or I'm going to make it into boxes for speakers. Oh, well, I'm involved in a project in Rathlin Island and we're going to make it into rat traps. Oh, and it's like a box from Wrightbus that the EV batteries get delivered in. So there's this creativity comes out of we want someone to make use of this because at the end of the day, we need space in our factory, we need space in our operations. Just we don't want a build up of material. So our waste contractors normally come in and just take this away. We don't really think about it. But now you're forcing people to have a thought on what are you throwing into the bin. It's still your responsibility. It's your belonging. It's your personal property. And who do you want to do the deal with? Gives them a wee bit more empowerment that it's not just discarded. So it's a challenge. So we go away from the workshops, Izzy, and we send people a report. So you'll get a report with the 8 people that said they can take your wood. You'll get the report that will show 4 people that wanted your steel offcuts with all the things that you've listed, and you'll have who you matched with, their phone number, their email, their name, and you'll hopefully have met them on the day. But the challenge is afterwards, we follow up a couple of weeks later. Okay, Izzy, that's going to save you 800 quid. Now, Izzy's challenge is, yeah, but Jacqueline, I know I wrote down those materials and I know how much we're spending to get rid of them, but finance just sign off on that bill anyway. Or, we've got a waste contractor in place. He's been in place for 3 years. I did say about the cost savings and this other company up the road would take them. Oh, and I emailed that girl and then she was on holiday or we didn't have anywhere to store the boxes. So sometimes people just revert back to what they're doing, the business as usual, because the costs are being covered. But that's where we need the finance people in the room.
Yeah.
And we need people really to start challenging back on, why are we paying for this? And this was a challenge even I had in construction where on the bill of quantities in every quarter, we are billing the waste costs to the client. So what's the incentive on the sites for them to reduce waste if the client are going to pay for it? And I'm saying, well, why is the client not challenging this? Why is the client okay with £25,000 of waste on a construction site in London? I mean, do the client not challenge that? No, Jacqueline, and I hope you won't be bringing it to their attention. Okay, well, if I need to bring it to their attention, I will do so. Because somewhere this needs to change. There's a disconnect here. Yeah, but all the other contractors are doing it. Okay, so just because all the other contractors are doing it,
That means we can do how to do it.
So yeah, you have to look at these enablers. What are the drivers? But we're finding it's sometimes the smaller organizations. But now we've got the bigger organizations. We've worked with the big manufacturing. We had Stephen Kelly speak from Manufacturing NI at our recent workshop up in Jerry, because there's big international costs and tariffs coming in to Northern Ireland, and people don't actually know what's happening down the road, or wow, you guys are making this, and we're making amazing plant and machinery that actually is for the waste crushing processing sector, but it all is going to Oman. Amazing machinery that's all manufactured here in Northern Ireland.
Yeah.
And in Northern Ireland, it accounts for 14% of manufacturing across the whole of the UK, and it's rising. England is 10% and it's declining. We're in a really good position, and we're such a small country. We even pride ourselves in knowing everybody and being great communicators. But even at that, we still don't know. We're still not talking enough.
Yeah.
We're still not collaborating enough.
Which is part of the purpose of this podcast.
So legislation at the moment for organization is dictating that they have to report on their scope 1 and 2 carbon emissions. So a lot of companies are some even struggling with this, but it's relatively easy to document your carbon footprint of your scope 1 and 2. What is your electricity purchased costs, your kilowatt usage of electricity coming in, what you're maybe burning on site, if it's gas heating. So that's, and then electric vehicles if you're doing charging and things on site as well. And a lot of companies then can claim, oh, we're going carbon neutral on our scope 1 and 2 by switching to electric or switching to a green energy tariff. And that's all great and that's all really good as long as they communicate that clearly. But where the challenge is this big grey area, the minefield of scope 3.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look at organizations' carbon footprint, 60 to 80% of the CO2 emissions are in your scope 3. And what I mean by scope 3 is everything upstream, so coming into an organization, and what is leaving the organization downstream. So that's everything I'm talking about. So your flights, your goods, everything. In fact, I challenge any listener to write to me, email me, send me a LinkedIn, whatever, to point out something that they're looking at the moment of time of listening to this that hasn't been grown out of the ground or mined out of the ground and brought to us by trucks and boats and trucks, because we're an island. So when you look around you, Izzy, I mean, there's nothing you can see really that hasn't been grown out of the ground or mined out of the ground and brought to us by machinery using truck, diesel and boats. So a huge carbon footprint behind that. So that's all the, we call it goods, materials, services, products coming in your scope 3, but also what's leaving. So downstream transport, the distribution, use of sold products. Well, your consumer, they buy that, processing of your sold products, even if they decide to put that item into a recycling bin. What are the processes? What's the end of life treatment of that product? What are your downstream leased assets, your franchises? Where are you investing? Where are your pension? Who are you banking with as an organization?
So all that's kind of showing support to organizations that are slightly better or that are deciding better, making different, more conscious decisions. And as a consumer, you have the responsibility and the right to choose what is best for you and our future.
Yeah, and it's really hard to document this. It's really hard to report. There's not a lot of legislation around it. Some of the organizations that are going down this route, like NSERC, who I was recently speaking with, and we held a workshop at their headquarters in Derry Lynn, and they said it's relatively straightforward in the sense that they know they make glass bottles. So they've got like maybe 5 or 6 key materials that are coming in and 1 or 2, 3 products that are leaving, essentially glass products. But even at that, it's really challenging. Never mind everything else. So other organizations, maybe you think of a construction company and what they're buying in, or IT, and that's a whole other minefield, isn't it, of data and AI. But when you think of that scope 3, really by adopting circular procurement approaches, because actually the more CO2 we're pumping into the atmosphere through our waste and extraction, how do we offset that removal? We would need to plant. But actually, If we can just stop all of that in the outset, we don't need to start planting trees or creating marsh wetlands that maybe can sequester 9 times more carbon than planting trees, for example. So we won't have such challenges if we adopt that more circular procurement practices.
Now, coming back to that, do you think that we are still on time to do that? Do you think that will be impactful enough, or are we kind of running out of time? Because there's a big conversation around that that says that we are actually past that time. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, I mean, even the UN, said that 2020 was the climate turning point. We're hoping to have met the 17 global SDGs by 2030 and then reach net zero by 2050. Yes, it's not looking great. I think sometimes a bit like the gold scenario, the more rare and precious something is, we will start to protect it. At the moment, we're just treating the earth as this endless supply of stuff that we want rather than what our needs are. And recently I went to visit Costa Rica, and I was particularly interested in going there because they've adopted the principles of donut economics. And that Kate Raworth from University of Oxford has written a book on. And this is all around the idea of looking at what are our needs? What are the social needs? Not necessarily the wants and the desires that can change for everybody, but what are those essential basic needs of human life? And when we think about the earth is being designed to produce clean air, clean water, and food. The way we're living is threatening the earth's ability to do those three things. What we're doing today is we're polluting the air, we're polluting the food supply, and we're polluting the water. So we need water to live, we need food, and we need air to breathe. So we need to live within the limits of what Earth was originally designed for and the capabilities. And then the outer ring of that donut is what are those environmental limits? And it's really interesting because, I mean, I'm not an economist. I really, from a sustainability perspective and seeing the mess of the world, it put me off legislation, it put me off politics, it put me off economics because I just saw it as very negative. But when you start reading into what she's doing, she kind of exposes GDP was born from post-war as a metric that was only supposed to be short-lived. And we're still using GDP as a measure of success because, oh, it's growth, it's economic growth. But what is it growth in? Is it mostly solicitors' bills for divorces or mitigation and litigation? What are actually we giving and what are we spending our money on in the UK? And that's where sometimes I will maybe ask a question or maybe rock up at an event and I kind of put up my hand and say, it's all about growth, growth, growth. How are we going to meet our climate targets? If you're talking about your terms of growth, can we not talk about degrowth? Or can we not talk about a stabling or a sustainable level of growth that we're actually just comfortable with, that will protect us, will protect our children and our children's children, and protect this planet's ability to look after our children's children? And people look at you very differently. Well, we're all about sales and we're existing as I won't mention any organizations, but there's lots of these enterprise organizations in Northern Ireland and they're trying to get products out there and it's all about selling and making your product amazing and, get on this marketing webinar, how to sell your product more, how to get online. And I'm thinking, no, we don't need any more stuff out there. We need to be creating things that we need sustainably.
We need to slow down.
Just to slow down, but have that really good level of sustainable growth that we're happy with. And this is sometimes where a bit of a paradox exists. So if we can go into an organization and show efficiencies with their water, waste, energy, and say, actually, by being more efficient, you can have all of your production done by 3 o'clock in the afternoon instead of previously you were working to 5, 6 o'clock. Well, what is that company going to do? Are they going to stop at 3 o'clock? No. And we've helped them with those efficiencies to say, now you've been really productive. Now you can use those 2 hours back for your staff or for, they go, no, we'll just work 2 hours extra then and we'll be able to make more and more. So it's kind of, that's a wee bit of a challenge. And that's where I then feel bad. I think, no, we're helping them make efficiencies to using less to make the same end product. But now they're just going to make more of that end product that we don't actually need. So I think you're asking the question, Will we kind of reach a better world? Sometimes when our back's against the wall, that's when innovation happens, with a catastrophe, disasters. And I do, going back to my opening comments around taking a leaf out of nature's book, nature does this really well. And it's not enough. People quote about the survival of the fittest. The strongest and most resilient are those that collaborate and partner and learn and share from each other and work together as communities and in an ecosystem. So it's not working in isolation. It is all about, I suppose, goal 17, partnership for the goals. I mean, look at politically at the moment, the price of oil, Ukraine, Iran, tariffs from America. But this is going to drive more focus to local supply chains to keep using stuff, as we call it, these goods in and out in Northern Ireland. So I try to always see that positive side. And probably, I don't know whether we're going to finish up soon, but what keeps me going and what keeps me positive is I actually do have a faith. Now, I say to people, whether you believe in a God or not, if you don't believe in a God, we have responsibility to look after this planet. We're part of nature and the science is there. If you do believe in a God, according to his word, even in the old Mosaic law that the British institution and legal framework was based on, it talked about, yes, take the eggs from the nest, but don't take the mother. And there was rules and guidance on animal husbandry. There were principles in place that govern the way we live, treating each other, loving your neighbor, loving your enemy. So thinking about, well, who is my neighbor? In this globalized world, it is people in India, Sub-Sahara, Africa, part of our supply chain. So if you adopt those principles of thinking of the people, loving the earth that God gave us as earth stewards to look after, and he designed it forever, it says, we need to value that gift. So that's what keeps me going. And I think if you can instill those values, I mean, organizations and people do things for two reasons. They either want to do it or they have to do it.
Yeah,
And it's so much better if you get them to want to do it because
absolutely.
they will apply that to everything they do at home and at work. At the moment, it's really hard to do that. That's all this behavioral psychology side. So it's better to go, okay, we'll force them to do it. So we'll either penalize them, heavier taxes, charge them more, or we'll incentivize them. So if you do it the right way, we'll subsidize this. At the moment, yeah, we're subsidizing the pretty bad industries like overfishing, fossil fuel exploration. So we need to incentivize and reward the good behavior.
Yeah.
So I do think there's a bit of both there. You have to either force people to do the right thing because they won't always. But I do try to, I suppose, get across to any organizations I'm working with, try and help them understand even concepts like social value. They say, oh, we need that social value to get on this framework. I say, but do you understand why? Oh, because that's what the government wants. They want us to help people that are underprivileged. No, it's not helping the government. It's actually helping us in our society. They don't see how they're connected to that. They feel that these things are imposed on them as an organization. And when you say, well, if there were more people working in society, that's more money on like taxpayers' money, and that more money to public sector spend can then create more roads and more houses and more hospitals and schools that you're actually building.
Mhm.
So actually, it means more work for you in the long run by taking on people who are out of work. Does that make sense? And they're like, oh, yeah, we never really thought of it that way. So I think there has to be a bit of communication. And that's where I believe we're missing, not just in Northern Ireland, but probably globally, these leaders train up the CFOs, the CSOs. You know, it's okay having a sustainability person in post, but actually,
It has to be a
if you're
culture within.
totally, and if your chief exec gets it, your finance person gets it, send them on a climate leadership full week immersive course. Help them have their climate conversion because they're the ones making these big decisions and the others will follow. Most organizations I speak with, the people on the ground are like, oh, I'd really like to do more, but we've only got this in place and we have to use our iPhone or we'll have to print it out because that's what my manager wants. So they'll only kind of do, and they maybe are afraid to challenge what their manager's doing. And we talk about maybe my role and my career path is a lot of the roles I've been in, I created for myself. I approached Graham Construction. It was a CD-ROM back in the day. about the value of the social side, investing in the social sustainability side of things, improvement, social cohesion, the environmental improvement, enhancement, protection, and economic regeneration and growth, proper sustainable economic growth. And they were like, oh, yes, well, we're asked about these things in our bids and tenders. We don't really understand how this applies to us. Could you come and work for us? And I said, yeah, sure. Is it paid? Yeah. And I went, okay, great. Because, for an environmentalist, you would do your job for free if you're going to help
Absolutely.
a big bad industry like construction. So I was the first sustainability person appointed for a UK or Irish construction company at the end of the 7.5 years, known as, I suppose, a green guru in green buildings and sustainability and BREEAM and FSC certification and low carbon concrete, all of these things. And then Blenheim Palace, again, I was speaking on local BBC Radio Oxford. They heard me and I went in, spoke to them, started asking them a few questions. What's your energy spend? What's your waste spend? And they didn't know. And I said, oh, you want to get your finance guy on? And the guy said, oh, that's me. And I said, oh, you told me you're the chief exec. Oh, yes, but I used to be finance. I said, but you told me how many visitors you have every year. You told me your exact acreage. You told me how many staff you have. You had all these metrics for your events, but you don't know what your spend is. That's really interesting, isn't it? So actually, if you were able to save £30,000, is that, can that equate to having two events in a weekend and having 6,000 people coming into the palace is actually the same as giving you £30,000 savings on your waste, which I could do. You need to think of it that way. Be smarter. There's going to be less people in the palace, so less humidity, less impact on all of your displays, less car parking, so less money for cleaning up all those fields with cars and driving, but you're still making the same amount of money. So I think there needs to be a switch. Companies are constantly thinking about their product out. Product out, that is what's going to sell. That's where money is in that product, rather than streamlining and reducing the operational cost.
I agree completely. There is this very intrinsic idea that we need to do more, faster, and more efficient. But the thing is that we need to slow down a bit. I am a great believer of slow mo movement and try to think before you act rather than do
Yes.
more, do faster. So let's just pause, think about what we're doing. Do we need to do it that way? Make better decisions, as you have pointed out really rightly. The decisions makers need to be more in tune with what is important
Yes.
and not just about the metrics in terms of revenues and savings as well. I mean, I understand that money is a big driver, but money will be completely useless if we don't have an environment to live in and our
Yes,
children start get sick. And we need to be more mindful of these things, or respectful to each other.
and Blenheim got that. We had a discussion at Blenheim. They took a risk. They took me on board as the first sustainability person for any landed estate or any palace. And it was part of the 10 treasure houses of England. And so it was great, that they saw, okay, we want to do the right thing. Yes, we're happy to support you getting rid of our plastic bags. Let's have cotton or jute in our shops. Let's try and procure everything within 60 miles in our fine dining restaurants, to the little cafe, to the pizzeria. Let's try and support the local economy, but we don't know what we're spending. Okay, let's partner with Brookes University and get them to do that study. Use this as a test bed for trials and finding new ways of doing things, whether it's around AI, environmental improvements. I hate coffee cups. I hate the single-use coffee cups. And I think actually as a country, we could be the world's first country to ban these
Yeah,
single-use
finish.
coffee cups, because we're a tiny country, 1.3 million. And we're spending money. In fact, it's mostly taxpayers' money that's costing to dispose of these cups because they're being thrown into general waste bins on the streets. We're not taking them back to the businesses where we got them for them to pay the disposal costs.
And that's something very interesting because most people would argue, oh, but they are compostable. But are they? Do we actually compost things? That's not necessarily the truth. And it costs us so much more money to dispose these quote unquote compostable. So yeah, I would completely agree. There's charity shop like loaded with cups and mugs, and we can just bring one and have them everywhere. So I love that.
Yeah, so we phased out the coffee cups, so now they're completely out of Blenheim Palace as a result. Eden project in Cornwall, Heathrow Airport, Lord's Cricket Ground. So, and I've helped bring some of those lessons learned even into Northern Ireland around reuse cups in the Odyssey, ICC, Ulster Rugby. But yeah, this idea of the coffee cup. So there's a returnable scheme now where you have a QR code etched into the cup. It says this is the property of Blenheim, because people might think, well, I've paid £2 for this. I'll just keep it as a souvenir. We don't want them to do that. We want them to put the cup back. And as soon as they put it into the bin, a reader comes out, scans that QR code and debits their account. Super easy. They're not having to queue. They don't have to wait for anything, because the grounds of Blenheim are open like 24-hour until late. So even after the palace closes at 4 o'clock, you can still walk around the grounds. So you can put your cup into a bin, leaving at 10 o'clock at night, for example. So just let's phase out, just design out the waste at the outset. And I looked at that and I thought, we're having so many coffee cups and they're contaminating my other waste streams, because people think they're cardboard and they can be recycled and they can't. And then people think they can go into the compost and they can't. So actually, just let's not have it as a waste issue. Let's just say no to coffee cups. And we're charging people like good enough money, and we're serving it in lovely ceramic cups, sit down. So I always say to people, even if they can do one thing this week, if they go to a coffee shop, if they're in a rush, ask for an espresso, ask for a flat white, it's a short one, and ask them to not make it so hot or just add more cold milk. Stand there and just drink your coffee. You can't technically drink so much coffee walking down the street if you are in a rush anyway. So stand there, do as they do in Italy. They don't walk around with these big, massive mugs and these cardboard coffee cups. They go to a shop, they get their little espresso in a lovely glass, little sugar, maybe a little biscuit at the side. They stand there, peruse, look around them. They get the others in the queue, drink their espresso, leave it. Thank you, ciao, bye-bye. That's the way to drink your coffee. Have it in a ceramic cup. I went to a meeting recently in one of the Northern Ireland government's buildings, and I was appalled that they had single-use coffee cups. And I thought, I can't use this. It's against everything I do, and I preach against this. So I said to some of the catering, are there any ceramic cups? No, this is all we have. And I said, right, I really want a coffee. But what I'm going to do is I emptied out the sugar bowl, and it had the little sachets of sugar, because the sugar bowl was ceramic. The lovely little small bowl. So I drank my coffee out of that. Now, Izzy, I didn't tell anybody. I didn't make a point. I didn't stand up in the middle of the room and show this to everybody. But people saw it. People saw what I did. And then it became a bit of a conversation for other people. And through the day, I kept reusing that. They kept throwing away their cups and by getting a new one, even though they were in the same room. I did try to hide them, and they were brought back out again. And since that meeting, people will now come up to me and say, oh yeah, I remember you. You drank out of the sugar bowl. I'm like, yeah. So we need to just do things a bit different. Lead the way. Be a trailblazer. Don't be afraid. Just be courageous. And don't just go with the flow. I mean, we talk about we like to be different and everything, but actually, as humans, we do find our little tribe.
Yes.
We are uncomfortable with change, but just be a wee bit maverick, become a bit more courageous, and people will remember you. And you don't have to shout about it. You can do it quietly and subtly, but someone will notice that and think, fair play. And of course, the comments were, good on you. Yeah, well, that's terrible. I have those cups. So it got a discussion going. Got them thinking. So sometimes our subtle behaviors can create conversations and behavioral change without us knowing.
Absolutely. I completely agree. And I am just so excited to have this conversation because I was just nodding and nodding and nodding constantly. This conversation has been incredible. Thank you so much for sharing your insights, your experience, your journey, and your passion for building sustainable and circular future. And, before we wrap up, this is what I want to leave you with today, because I believe that, Jacqueline, you have reinstated what I've been trying to say for a while, and is that change doesn't start with sweeping legislation or massive corporate pledges or multi-million pound investments. Of course, those things matter. Of course, I'm not saying they don't. But what I'm trying to say is that they are almost always triggered by people like you, people who are pay attention, who ask for better questions, who drinks from the sugar bowl, who see possibilities where others see waste. I think that if people are brave enough to try a different way. And today's conversation resonated really much, really with you, because I would love you to, for the listeners, to share this episode with someone who cares about our planet and cares about our environment. I would like you to tag us with your thoughts, your takeaways, and answer Jacqueline's plea earlier about finding what are they doing for their scope 3. And you can find more episodes, resources, and stories of transformation with wherever you're listening. So I'm Izzy Boyd, and this was Conversations with Agents of Change. Thank you so much again, Jacqueline, for being here. Until next time, keep imagining better, keep acting boldly, and keep being the spark. Thank you so much. This podcast is produced by the Change Impact Group.